Hello there. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to Cat's Culture Counter. And this is my podcast series, The Foundation of Culture. And for this one, I'm wrapping up part four that is featuring or concentrating on music and the contribution of Black Americans and what they basically did in regards to being pioneers of various music genres. If you have not caught them thus far, I have done blues, jazz, and rock and roll. And today we're doing hip hop. Now, there's only one person that I'm going to talk about today. But before we get started, please consider subscribing if you have not already. Share it with someone that loves music and is a curious mind. If you do have any additional information about any of the artists that I have covered, I'd love your comments in the comments section. And let's go ahead and get started. Now, man, reading about this cat. Oh, such a cool individual, and he went by Hercules. I cannot say it like Eddie Murphy, but DJ Cool Herc from Hercules. That's right. So he was born. His name Clive Campbell, and he was born on April 16th, 1955. He is currently 71 years old, and he's known as DJ Cool Herc. Now, he is Jamaican American, and he's the pioneer of hip hop music. I don't think that anybody else would doubt this. If you have an opinion otherwise, I want some receipts, because after reading about what he did and who he influenced, I don't think there's any debate. But if you have something to say about it, go ahead and comment. Now, he, among others, popularized it in the Bronx. But when I get into the nitty gritty of what he did, I think you'll agree that he was the true pioneer of hip hop. Now, he is referred to as a founder, and he's nicknamed Father of Hip Hop. So let's learn about him. Now, he began by playing hard funk records. Starting out, he was leaning heavily into James Brown records. And what he did basically is, by the instrumental portion of the record, he would kind of isolate it and emphasize the drum beat. And that was called the break, or that's what they call the break. And that is the switch from one break to another, to, like, you see people with two turntables. That's the break, how they're switching back and forth, from what my understanding is. Now, so he would use those two that before, previously, it was like disco DJs that were using them. So he would use the same record, and he would elongate the break. Now, the breakbeat DJing, like, he would be like using funky drum solos, and that would form what would become, with hip hop music, it's very like basis of like fundamentally, that's what came into being from doing that. And then he would, with his B-boys and B-girls, which were break boys and break girls, he would call out to them, and he'd be like, it helped, like, as they're dancing, they're emphasizing the breaks, and it's like all syncopated, and they would like do the call and answer, and was what became known as rapping. So it'd be like the rhythmically, like, accompaniment that was spoken back and forth, that became rapping. Okay, so be boys, be girls. They're out in the audience, and he'd be saying to them, he would want more energy, and they would go and they'd be. I'm sure there's like call and answers, and they're just like repeating parts of it, and like there's certain things that were being said. They just add on to it, and it just brings this like passion and excitement. And I could just only imagine the energy that was just kind of flowing, and that's contagious, right? So even now, 50 years later, in the sport of breaking, that's what they're referred to. Be boys and be girls. Break boys and break girls. So his style was like African Bambaataa and Grandmaster Flash. They jumped right on that, and they quickly started like utilizing this style, but they became like commercially, they started like recording like hip hop in the early years, but he never made that move. So in 2023, he was inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as for his musical influence for the Musical Influence Award. So that they recognized his contribution and that he pretty much was instrumental as far as being a pioneer. Now let's go back to his history a little bit. Was the first of 6 children, and his parents' name were Keith and Nettie Campbell. And that's in Kingston, Jamaica. Now, in the dance halls, because that's what they would call them, the neighborhood parties, and the like in the I guess brick and mortars dance halls, he would go and he would see and he would hear the like how the sound systems were kind of like working, and the accompanying speeches of the DJs. Now they did not call it rapping because it started to formulate in a different way when he started DJing, but they call it toasting. So when they immigrated to the US, he was 13 years old and they moved to the Bronx. And that was in 1967, and they lived on Sedgwick Avenue. So you probably have heard of Sedgwick Avenue because when you're talking about the birth of hip hop and rap and all of that stuff, you probably heard that. Okay. So he attended the Alfred E. Miller Career and Technical Education High School. And here comes how he got his nickname, because he's very tall. Let's see, I think he's like, I'll have to get his height. I'll probably post it in here, like how tall he is, but he's very tall and he had a large frame. And with his demeanor on the basketball court, other kids started calling him Hercules. Okay, so how does it get to be Herc? The 5%ers saw him get into a physical altercation with some school bullies, and they befriended him and taught him about the Americanized, like they like Americanized him, he said, on how New York street culture. And he started running with a crew, a graffiti crew called the X Vandals. And then that's when he took on the name Cool Herc. So abbreviated Hercules and made it Cool Herc. Now he persuaded his dad to buy him James Brown's Sex Machine. I'm a sex machine. You know that song, that record. And not a lot of his friends had it. So he would have them over and they would go in the recreation room of his building on Sedgwick Avenue and they would, come and listen to it. And so his first sound system that he's like, his friends, he has this like brilliant mind when it comes to this thing, because he's like, hey, I've seen this in Jamaica. Let me, it's part of his, what he's been exposed to. And he's like, okay, my sound system, he brings his 2 turntables connected to 2 amplifiers and a Shure Vocal Master PA system. And then he had 2 speaker columns. And then so he would play James Brown, like Give It Up or Turn It Loose, Jimmy Castor's It's Just Begun, or Melting Pot by Booker T and MGs. So Bronx clubs were having problems with street gangs. Okay. They were having like major problems. So this is how he gets his audience, because DJs started catering to like the disco crowd that was older. and had different aspirations. They were like going after like how they made their meat and potatoes. They're like just trying to like how they made the dough. They were like, this is what we're gonna do. And then commercial radios, like, you know, they were catering to like a different demographic from teenagers in the Bronx. So like at his parties, he's like, hey, with his sister, his younger sister Cindy, that's their audience. Younger kids in the Bronx, teenagers in the Bronx, because he was like 18 when he had his first like party. So then let's talk about this. Okay, so this is what went into the development of his hip hop music. What he would do is he would try and like figure out like a short part of the record to focus on. And it would usually have like a very like heavy percussive portion. And that's what he focused on to do like the break in the record to like focus on. So since that was like his dancers, they would like that part come out, the energy is like pumping up, and that is what the dancers like the best. So he would isolate that part and he would prolong it I mean, like 5 minutes. He would keep doing it back and forth, doing the break. And so he would like prolong between the two record players. And so when one reached the end, he'd have it cued in the second one, and then back to the beginning of the break. And so a relatively like short section, he turned that into, they would call a 5-minute loop of fury. So you could only imagine. I know that there's parts of songs that they're just like this little catchy part that you just glom onto that brings people to the dance floor. It may be the melody of the song, or they'll hear a certain like part of it, and like I mean, like people are like, that is it causes you to just jump out of your seat and dance, and that's what he would focus on because he knew that would get people up. Now, what he called this, like this whole like going back and forth between it, he called it the merry-go-round. And it's just a technique in which they switch from break to break at the height of the party. Now he's called it back and forth with no slack. And for me, that like makes sense. If you see any of these like house party or whatever, and they got DJs playing, and you see anything, with a music video or whatever, where they're like focusing on, what I'm talking about now that I'm talking about it. And this is the originator. So that's why everybody needs to know about him even more, because I know a lot of people know about him, but even more need to know about him because I tell you, it blows me away. Okay, so he first, in 1973, that's when he first introduced merry-go-round. Okay, now it was the Give It Up or Turn It Loose by James Brown. Now, clap your hands, everybody, right? Clap your hands, everybody. Everybody stomp your feet. You think about that. And but that's where it's like it's got a little frame part in it, right? And so he would switch it from that record to break into the break from the second record, which would, be like Incredible Bongo Band. They're bongo rock. That's what he did when he first established it. So I'm gonna not change from that because that's what he literally did. So then when from bongo rock, he had a third record, and it was from the English rock band Babe Ruth, and it was called The Mexican. So that's where he, like 1973, that's what he's doing, right? Now, he also was instrumental in like hip hop, the rhyming style. He punctuated the recorded music with slang phrases. So that's how he came up with the rhyming style, because of course it's going to flow with the music, right? So then he said, rock on my mellow. And that's for his like B-boys and B-girls. And he's asking them, are they ready? Are you ready? And then he's like, keep on rock steady. This is a joint. Herc beat on the point. To the beat, y'all. You don't stop. I know I can't rap. So I didn't want to mess up the words, but yeah, I think that that's just like, I'm smiling right now talking about it because learning about this gentleman, I'm just like, wow, he is the man. Seriously. So because of his contributions, like that's where he got the founding father of hip hop. Time nicknamed it with that. And they actually said he was an ascent cultural hero and an integral part to the beginnings of hip hop. So, first party in 1973, his younger sister, she wanted money, she wanted extra cash for back to school clothes. Cindy's like, let's organize a party. She styled him up. She did his clothes and it would happen on Sedgwick Avenue. So what they did, she like did flyers and she organized it. So they're like, he was 18, she was younger. It doesn't say her age, but she was younger. And then they're just going to play music for the neighborhood in their apartment building. So then he came on with Brown's Sex Machine from 1970. And he ran an extended cut mix of the percussion breakdown with that give it up, turn it loose. Hence the birth of hip hop. Oh my God. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So now we're talking about breakdancing. Now, the B-boys and B-girls, they would be the dancers to Herc's breaks. So they were who were described as breaking. Now he noted that it's street slang for getting excited, acting energetically, causing disturbance. And so he actually termed he came up with the phrase B-boy, B-girl, and because of the breaking part of it. And that is, don't, no one could tell you that is not fundamentally part of hip hop breakdancing, right? So Grandmaster DXT, he was a B-boy, early B-boy, right? And he was a DJ innovator. And he said, everybody, I'm going to read this. Everybody would form a circle and the B-boys would go into the center. And the first dance was simple. Touch your toes, hop, kick your leg. Then some guy went down, spun around on all fours. Everybody said wow and went home to try and come up with something later. That's the start of breakdancing. Now you think about people spinning on their head, there was they would like, stop and they'd be on an elbow with their leg up and all that stuff. So then people would see somebody doing it. It's a simple move. And then they go home and they probably practice. What can I do to one up this person? And then those were the building blocks to breakdancing. Come on, y'all. Seriously, that is like the media, because it's during the breaks, right? They started calling it breakdancing. So then the New York Times is like, it's an art as demanding and innovative as mainstream dance forms like ballet and jazz. It's really, really, really stinking cool. I tell you, I did not realize that one person, like, well, I do realize it because some people are just like, their brilliance is just the way it manifests and the way that it like inspires and the way that it changes things fundamentally so that things can never be the same again. This is what this man did with these hard funk records. And he said, you know what? This sounds good to me. Let me see what I can do with this. And he actually did it. And he changed music. You think about all the people that had their careers, Beastie Boys. You think about all these people. Run DMC. What? Furious Five. You think about White Lines. You think about all of these songs that seriously people steal that and like culturally they like try and make it their own, like they're reinventing the wheel, when this guy actually ground the stone, shaped, made the holes, made it functional. The person that did that, for you to say, oh, but I made the wheel blue. I am fundamental. I am so creative. No, step back. That wheel was shaped, smoothed, and made functional by an individual of Jamaican heritage. And he's only the American's part of it is only because he moved to America and then brought his brilliance here. So people need to like give credit where the credit's due. And I'm not saying everybody's, because I'm sure anybody that is like a purist knows who he is. They know his contributions, right? Okay, so we're just going to talk about a few of the people that he, just in case you're like, oh, this person was the originator. Okay, now Grandmaster Flash called him his hero. Okay, then he began DJing in Herc style. Flash and his MCs, the Furious Five, they played a packed ballroom in Manhattan, and they were nervous. The young crowd and all that stuff there, but soon they sent hip hop back to the clubs, community centers, and high school gymnasiums in the Bronx because they were nervous. So they sent it back. So then it began to like become more, it cooked more, right? It cooked more and more people heard about it. So African Bambaataa, he heard about Cohort in he heard of him in 73. Now he was in the Black Spades. Now they were pretty notorious gang in the Bronx, but he obtained his sound system in 75. And then he began to DJ in Herc style. So then he's like, his followers, he's like, took them to the nonviolent route, the Zulu Nation, because of this. Using it. Now he began to use like the incredible bongo bands, Apache, in a break in 75. And it became like a favorite of the B-Boys. It's called the Bronx National Anthem, and it's still used in hip hop today. Now let me read what Steve Hager said. For over 5 years, the Bronx had lived in constant terror of street gangs. Suddenly, in 1975, they disappeared almost as quick as they arrived. This happened because something better came along to replace the gangs. That something was eventually called hip hop. Now in 79, record executive Sylvia Robinson, she formed a Sugar Hill Gang. They recorded Rapper's Delight. Then commercially, we're seeing like it happen commercially where more people were seeing it. It's being expanded out. And by that year, the end of the year, Grandmaster Flash, he's recording on for Enjoy Records. 1980, African Bambaataa, he's recording for Winley. But by this time, his star had faded. And like I said in my previous one, it happens all the time. Who's inspired by? But the thing about it is I truly believe these musicians that came down the grapevine after him, from all my accounts, like the ones that became like huge and all that, they give him his props, and that makes me feel good. It's other races that bite into it that I want to see doing this more, because when I'm talking about in the previous podcast, when I'm talking about Black Americans being fundamental in certain genre, and pretty much like, because everything's like original, it's originating in blues, it's originated in like, the jazz is giving it like it's fire, right? And then rock and roll is giving it's like this like vitality, and then hip hop's giving it's this rhythm of like excitement. And people need to give the props where they're due and stop like with all the racism that's going toward Black Americans or Blacks of African descent, which, originally we're all from Africa, right? These people that are being racist from them, guess what? They originated in Africa too. They just land masses separated, their skin adjusted, their nose adjusted, their lips adjusted, their stature adjusted, but they originated in Africa. But they're still racist against the originators, the ones that like breathe life into this whole civilization that is living. And any contribution that is given to, added to, originated, formulated from Black Americans that they don't want to give credit for, they will not. They will become an Elvis Presley. They will become a Led Zeppelin. Because it's seen as more acceptable. Yeah, they didn't accept Elvis at first, but guess what? They did, and he became an icon. To me, that's some bullshit. Excuse me for the foul language, but it is. He released his first final record with Mr. Green, and that was in 2019. So we know that he was ill before that, and he did not have health insurance. He had kidney stones. He had, a stent to relieve the pressure. I've suffered from kidney stones. I know that the pain of it. So I just, breaks my heart because it's so painful. And I had it when I was pregnant too. It's like, very, very painful. So he had surgery, and so they wanted a deposit for the next surgery because he missed several visits, but they said, we will not turn away uninsured patients. They set up they set up a website. He described his medical condition, and he set a larger goal of like setting up a fund to pioneer like long-term health solutions. And then in 2013, he recovered and he moved into post-medical care. And then he had his album. He put out his album. So, he's still alive. And I'm just incredibly grateful that I've learned about him. And I'm incredibly grateful for the origination and the contribution and the development and the vision that he had in regard to hip hop. Because Japan, China, Korea, you see these dance styles that are biting off of hip hop, breakdancing, and this is who should be getting credit for that. Okay. You found value in this podcast? Thank you. If you listen to this point, you need to subscribe. If you're not subscribed, just go ahead and do it. Just go ahead and do it. And then I'm moving up. My next series is going to be discussing unique cultural events and practices of places around the country. So keep an eye out for that. And I appreciate you so much. Share this podcast with someone that would love to learn more about the origination of hip hop and its pioneer, DJ Kool Herc. And I will see you on the next one. Bye.